Hi, Sandy. How are you tonight?
Great, Diane.
I just want to thank you for taking the time to meet with me. I really appreciated having lunch with you a couple of weeks ago. It was really great to just get to know you, really get a better understanding of what you do for your clients and, for people like me, basically, that are just kind of either maybe new to the whole dating scene or for me, kind of re-engaging and just trying to figure out, some of the options and some of the things to be looking out for. So, like I said, really enjoyed our lunch. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I appreciate your willingness to do this interview. I think that I put together a few questions, and I think that these are, certainly questions that I've had, and I think a lot of people in my situation have as well. So hopefully this will be some great information for a lot of my followers. So I'll just get right into the questions if you're ready.
Sure, go for it.
Okay, sounds good. Um, so how much information do you think you should share on your first date?
Well, prior to the first date, I would say only share your first name, and you should have created an email address just for use in dating. And you need to make sure that it doesn't show your last name as the recipient, when you're sending an email out to somebody. Like, example, mine is Sassy Sandy,
Oh, okay.
is what I use for dating purposes. And you can even have little calling cards made if you want. So if you're out at some event and you meet somebody and you want to give them your information, you can have your cell phone number and your email address on that. And you can get those free at a lot of different places. Also, make sure that your cell phone does not show on caller ID your last name,
Okay, that's really
because
smart.
you don't want somebody to have your last name before you've been able to find out if they're really who they say they are.
Okay, that sounds great. So, I shared with my followers recently about a little survey I'd seen about where people felt comfortable having their first date. And for me, I was really surprised because 25% of the people said their first date was at their house, and 25% said their first date was at the other person's home. And
Yeah.
I found that very surprising. So I'm looking forward to your input on what you think is an appropriate place for a first date.
I think any place that's a public venue, you can be at a park, you can be at Starbucks, you can be someplace where you can arrive and leave in your own vehicle, or in the case of people that live in more urban areas, they can grab a bus or a subway, something like that. But you need to make sure that you can leave and arrive safely without necessarily them knowing what vehicle you're in. And, some people meet at museums, libraries, some common interest type place, but in the public.
I think that's, like I said, that seems like much better advice than meeting at someone's home for the first time.
Definitely.
So now this is the next question. I think is probably a little more, personal and a personal preference. But once again, just looking for your input. How long do you think someone should wait before becoming intimate?
Well, I like Patty Stanger, the millionaire matchmaker's philosophy. She says, not until you're in a monogamous relationship. And that can be determined by, how quickly you start dating. If you're only dating once a week or once a month, obviously it's going to take a little longer. But if you're seeing somebody every night, I still think, I'm old-fashioned. I think, at least 3 months. But, that's depending on the age of the person dating. I think they're a little more apt. The younger they are, the more apt they are to accelerate.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. Like I said, I kind of fit in your category. I'm a little more old fashioned, so certainly takes longer for me.
And definitely, you need to discuss the intimate subjects of whether they're willing to take, if they've had an HIV test,
Right.
whether they're willing to take one, and what their attitudes are towards safe sex,
Right.
using condoms and things like that.
I
Because
think
you
that's
should talk
really,
about that before you get into bed.
yeah, because once you're there, those discussions don't often take place. So I think that's really important. Certainly been one of the things that I've in my blog have expressed a concern about is, just not really knowing, they always say if you sleep with someone, you're sleeping with everybody they ever slept with. So in some cases that can be a lot of people.
And I, not only because it's my business, but for my safety, I don't even get in a car with somebody until I've checked them out. If, from the standpoint of, is their name really their name?
Right.
Does their picture match, what you see on the dating site? It's not always the case. You've seen the catfish, scenarios on television and in print. I find them every day in different venues, whether it's dating sites or LinkedIn.
Well, and it's interesting. That really leads right into the next question, which was truthful online profiles. Why is there such a gap, and how do we overcome this? So,
I think most profiles, I want to say, are truthful, because I tend to think that people are honest about the values and what their interests are. They tend to hedge a little bit, women on age, men on and weight, and men do on their height, which all of them are very obvious when you do meet somebody. And then you wonder if they're lying about stuff like that, what else could they be not telling the truth?
Right. So true. Yeah, and I always wondered about that, because if you're really looking for a relationship, that whole lying on your profile about something significant doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, because, eventually they're going to meet you and find out the truth, more than likely. So.
And I met one guy in Fashion Square in Scottsdale, and I was in Nordstrom's, and he had called me, said that he was there, and he was on the steps going into the food area, and I was coming out of Nordstrom's, and I could tell he was not the 5'9" that he said he was. And by the time he got to me, he had lost 5 inches. And he was actually 5'4".
Wow.
And then, we had our drink and, chatted. And I have a thing about dating guys that are shorter than me. It's just my personal preference. And he said, well, are we going to go on another date? And I said, not really, because you lied about how tall you were. So short girls have a great time on online dating.
I kind of have that advantage, so I like to wear my heels, but I can always go in flats as well. So, what advice do you have for people who are just getting started with online dating? And does this vary based on their age?
Well, number one, I think you need to be yourself, because truth will out in the end. If you say you like, car racing and you can't stand it, that's not a good foundation for any kind of relationship. So you got to be honest. I think different age groups, some things are more important than others. The younger dating person is perhaps looking for someone to be a mate and marry and have children with, whereas the middle-aged person has been there, done that. They're not interested in that. They're looking for maybe somebody who likes to travel, somebody with, the same interests or similar interests, compatible interests. And then the older person is tending to look more for companionship, I think, and depending on, how active they are physically.
Yeah. And I've seen some of that just in the online profiles that I've seen, that, a lot of people maybe in the little bit older category are kind of looking for that, just, companionship, maybe more so than a lot of other things. So, okay. How about men versus women? Do you think you'd give them different advice?
Depending on the person, and depending on the age. I find the biggest differences are in our age group and older, is that men are, depending on whether they're widowed or divorced, okay, they have different expectations. The divorced men sometimes are a little wary about getting into relationships because they've been burnt, either financially or emotionally. It carries baggage with it because of, having families that, they have to deal with. Same thing for women. If you have children, then that has to be an important factor in who you're dating. I think also that women look more for security and romance / intimacy. And communication's a big thing with women. Some men don't communicate real well their interests or their thoughts. Men, I think, want companionship. Sometimes a homemaker or hostess wife type situation, and definitely the sex / intimacy. Not necessarily the same thing.
Very true, very true. So, okay, that's great advice. So curious, what's one of your most successful online dating stories that you know about?
Well, let's see. I've actually had three personally that I'd say two are a success. The last one remains to be seen.
Okay.
And they were great guys that I met. Unfortunately, they were at a time and a place where I wasn't really ready for a relationship. First one was a great guy. It was too soon after my divorce. The second one was really sweet. He was thoughtful. He wanted to take me on cruises. Was going to propose, I found out later. But he wanted somebody that was going to be there 24/7. And that's not my personality. He had a wife that passed away, that she never worked. She played golf, she played bridge, she was always available. And it happened that when I was starting my business back in 2008, I was asked to speak on very short notice, and I said, hey, I can't see you for 4 days. I've got to get ready. And he goes, well, you don't have to work. I'll take care of you. And I go, that's very sweet, but I've always been, self-sustaining and independent, and he just couldn't handle that.
Yeah.
And so we broke up. We got back together, saw him last year, had a good time, good evening together, but it just, we were in different places at different times. And then my last one I thought was a great relationship. Met this, what looked like perfect man. Unfortunately, he had been married 6 times. He was a drama king, and, they talk about women being drama queens. Well, this gentleman was a compulsive liar. He said he'd been a minister. He said he'd been a war veteran. Said he had been a highway patrolman, which was true, but he neglected to mention the 6 wives.
Wow.
And, he said his daughter had passed away in an accident, and then subsequently his 2 grandchildren by this daughter had died in a car accident, which when we talked to wife number 5, we found out he hadn't seen his daughter since she was a teenager, so how would he know if he had any grandchildren? So, it looked like a great relationship. Had he signed his divorce papers for number 6, we might have gotten married, but, luckily he didn't, and we broke up, and then I got to meet number 6 and got together with number 5, and we made new friends.
Sounds like quite the party.
It was interesting, let's just say that.
Oh,
not an experience I'd care to replace. But wife number 6 did meet a guy on Match, and Patty is her name, and she and her beau Roger have been together for 9 months now. They're extremely happy. He's a widower. She was widowed before the gentleman that, she was married to. And, they're happy as could be. It just takes asking the right questions at the right time to find out, whether you're compatible or not.
Yes. Well, certainly sounds like, you've had both positive and negative experiences. So, and I'm sure that's just kind of part of the process,
More positive than negative. I think online dating gets a bad rap sometimes.
Yeah. Well, that's good to know because I've, really new at it. But so far, honestly, my experiences have been pretty positive. I mean, one person was not honest on their profile. I could tell they'd lied about their age and they had, older pictures and that sort of thing. But, the gentleman I met recently seems like a great guy. He travels a little bit with work. So we'll see where that one goes. But I'm excited about it.
Good.
So I guess you've kind of covered one of the failures that would have been your last experience. I don't know, do you have any others you'd like to share?
Well, I think it's important to, like I said, to ask the right questions and to actually listen to the answers. Sometimes you get so involved in the emotion and, the compliments and the places you're going and get into the moment that you don't really pay attention to all of that they're saying and how they say it. So, you got to listen to what they're saying, and they need to listen to you. And if you don't get the feedback that the answers or something work for you, or that he's not paying attention, then maybe you should look someplace else.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I think, like you said, it's easy to get caught up in the moment. So, like I try to tell my kids sometimes, dating should be approached a little more like a job interview than, the big
Exactly.
romance. But, it's kind of tough to do that at the time. But, there's a lot of information that you need to know about the other person. And, if you can kind of keep your head on straight and gather a little bit of that information up front, that's always helpful.
Right.
So, as I've, talked to you and, done research online and different things, one of the things that it seems to me is, there needs to be a lot of safety standards kind of around online dating. And it's interesting I wonder if things are kind of going the other direction with some of the new sites like, Tyndall and just some of the sites that are out there. I know people refer to them as hookup sites. I'm sure they've always been around, but do you feel like people are gearing up more towards, having more safety standards, or do you think they're just, kind of out for the game more so?
Well, I'm not familiar with Tinder, but I think even the middle-age group nowadays is kind of getting into the instant gratification mode that the younger generation gets accused of. As we get older, we have less time, at least as far as we think. But yet I have friends that found each other in their 80s.
Wow.
They were widowed or divorced and, met either online or at a social event and fell in love. So you're never too old. But, there's different types of websites, dating websites that are for different personalities. If you've done eHarmony, you know that it's like 12 pages long to fill out the profile. And a site like that tends to attract a very detail-oriented person, an architect, an accountant, sometimes lawyers, engineers, definitely. Whereas Match is more of a social, venue. They ask a little broader, general questions. Plenty of Fish was designed originally by a mathematician for his thesis in mathematics. And he created this algorithm that matched instantly. And I like Plenty of Fish. You can pick different kinds of relationships you want to be in. Maybe you're not ready for an emotional relationship, but you just want to go to the ball game or you want to go to the opera with somebody. And you can find people on Plenty of Fish that will do that. You can also find somebody that wants to get into a relationship or just wants to date. So there's different sites for different reasons. And if one doesn't work for you, try another one.
Okay. I think, and I think that's great advice as well, because I think sometimes people try one, and if they don't have necessarily a good experience, they don't meet the kind of people they'd like to meet, then they kind of put online dating just into one bucket of it's not for me, versus taking your advice and trying different sites to where they might have a different experience.
Yeah, no, I grew up with a lot of Jewish friends and still have, and I tried JDate. I bombed. Nobody bothered. I guess they didn't like blonde chicks, but yet, I'm not, as religious as some people, so I've avoided the, Christian singles group because, especially since my last relationship, who said he was a retired minister, I'm going, okay, should have seen that red flag when I saw it on his profile. My daughter certainly said, Mom,
If we just listen to our kids sometimes, maybe.
Exactly.
So how do you see technology? I mean, obviously, when you think back, a number of years ago, online dating obviously wasn't even an option. How do you see technology kind of impacting the whole dating environment?
I think it's grown from 2008, which is the last conference I went to on the dating industry. It's quadrupled in the number of people involved in it. It's something like 12 million people right now are involved. And I think as people move around the country because of jobs or retirement, they need a source of people to get acquainted with. I just wish, and hopefully, this will be the case, that they create their algorithms to actually read what we say. Like I mentioned, I like guys that are tall. I don't want to date somebody that lives in Goodyear, when I live in Scottsdale. So and it seems like some of them just don't pay attention to some of our requests that we put in there. And I definitely, this is not to the point, but I don't recommend dating outside your geographic area because you cannot get to know somebody long distance. It just doesn't work, especially if they won't do Skype or do Hangouts where you can actually talk to them live.
I think those are some of the stories that you hear about, where people have had not good online dating experience have been the long distance ones where, they don't meet the person in person. And so it leaves more room for there to be deception, I think, in those situations.
There's a new show on I found a couple of weeks ago called Love Prison, and it's on A&E, and they take a couple who's been emailing and consider themselves having a relationship, even talking to each other on Skype, and put them in a house for a week with no electronics, no means of entertainment other than talking and asking questions and things like that. And so far, out of the 3 weeks that I've watched it, only one couple wanted to see each other afterwards because they depended so much on technology and other electronic entertainment. They didn't know how to sit down and talk to each other. And they've been communicating for over a year.
Yeah,
they knew each other. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, I think there's nothing like face-to-face interaction to get to know somebody. So, so do you have encouraging words for some of those on the sidelines of online dating?
Yeah, dive in, but do it cautiously. Use common sense. Remember when we used to tell our kids about stranger danger? Well, you need to keep the same thing in mind regarding dating. You need to not go to their house. Well, first of all, you need to do a Google image search. And if you don't know how to do that, you can go to Google and type in, how do I do a Google image search? It's where you take a picture from an online dating site or anybody's picture that's posted, and you put it into Google, and it will bring up that picture associated with a name. Some cases, it's 319 different names. Sometimes it's just one name, But you need to make sure that the person, if you're not Skyping or Hangout, that you're actually talking to the person that you think you're talking to. Get their last name, Do a local criminal record search. You can do that by just Googling or going on and typing in the county you live in, put criminal record search, or the state you live in. Check property records to see if they're divorced. If they say they're divorced, make sure that they really are divorced and that their wife is not still part of their life. Because if you forget to take that off during the divorce, then usually that's kind of a red flag. Like you mentioned, don't have your date pick you up at your house, and don't come back to their house. A lot of identity theft is associated with dating because people leave out their checkbooks, you leave your purse out, you go into the other room, either, to the restroom or take a phone call. Not everybody is as honest as we would like them to be. Always talk on the phone, like I said, with Skype, visually make sure that you know who you're talking to. And if a guy objects to giving you his last name before you give him yours, then tell him to take a hike, that you value your safety and he should not have any concerns about that. And, I tell guys, I do background checks. That's my company. I do it for single people. And so, they know I have it in my profile. I do background checks. So if they're going to go out with me, they know that I'm going to have checked them out before I get in the car with them, let alone get into bed.
I think that is just such great advice. As I said, the whole safety thing's just been a big factor for me. And, so that's one of the things I appreciated when we went to lunch was just all of that great safety advice that you've given me. So I appreciate you sharing that. So for anybody who's, does feel like the whole online dating thing isn't for them, any suggestions of other places to meet someone that could be your soulmate?
Yeah, the beer and chips department at a grocery store before a big sporting game event works good. Church groups, although some scammers now are starting to target, church groups because they know that, the church is sponsoring them and they don't check out who goes to church.
Right.
So interest groups, like photography or college classes that you might want to take, gardening, landscaping, some interest that you have that you'd like to find somebody that, shares that interest. Music, theater, museum, being a volunteer. You get to meet people that are volunteers. In fact, that's one of my trick questions when I meet somebody. I ask them if they volunteer. And then I say, well, I'm a blood donor. Well, as a blood donor, you get your blood checked every 3 months for an HIV. So, I at least as well as whether they're, that type of person, which I am I believe in volunteering, giving back to the community. The other thing is get a part-time job at some kind of venue where there's a lot of men, like golf courses, fishing, tackle shops, anything that is car dealerships, Ferrari dealerships, if you like race cars. I like fast cars and convertibles, so, that would be an ideal place for me. But just be open to meeting new people anywhere you are. Don't stand off if you're in a group of people or in an elevator. Remember how when you get in an elevator, everybody's so quiet? Say hi.
I think that's one of the things that I've learned over the last year with now that my kids have gone off to college is I've really just tried to open myself up to meeting people when I'm out and about, restaurant, wherever I'm at, grocery store, you name it. And it's really amazing in the last year how many people I've met. And, I didn't have men approach me for years, and people would say, well, you kind of, you have this like wall, they can tell that you're just not interested. So I
Right.
really have noticed a difference in just trying to open myself up to meeting new people and, being willing to say hi and make eye contact and all of that. So I think it does make a big difference.
Also ask your friends, both male and female. Say, hey, I'm looking for a great guy and I have a lot to give. If you know anybody, fix me up, not hook me up. Because you want to make sure that you're giving out the right vibes. Yeah.
Yes. So, Sandy, I really appreciate your time. Please just share once again what contact information you'd like for people who would like to reach out to you that might be interested in your services.
Okay. I actually have a business called Check Out a Date. It's checkoutadate.com, where we do background checks on singles, for singles. And I recommend it before you make that leap onto the nice soft mattress. Originally, one of my clients she had already gone to bed with this guy, and she asked to do a background check because she didn't think he did the occupation that he said he did. And we found out he had 92 pages in his background check. He had 27 aliases and 27 different women that he had lived with in the valley.
Wow.
Now, she broke up with him, needless to say, because, he was not relationship material, but he turned into a stalker.
Oh.
So, you need to, and nobody knows when we do background checks, and they're done by licensed PIs. But I also have an app that has been created. It's called Check Out a Date Questions. And it goes through the cycle of meeting somebody, getting into knowing them better, and a relationship. And it also tackles those intimate questions that you may not know how to phrase, which is particularly important in the senior set because they didn't have to worry about, the degree of STDs that are out there now. And so if they don't know how to ask the question, they're not going to. Which is not a good deal. So it tells you how to ask questions, what kinds of questions you should be asking, depending on what your needs are, and listening to the replies. And, it's kind of, if you keep dating the same kind of person and they're not the right kind of person, then you must be doing something wrong. So it kind of makes you evaluate what you think is important in the dating process. So hopefully you don't make the same mistakes again.
And I've checked out some of your questions, and there are some great questions. There are things that I would never have thought to ask. So I think that's, great tool for people who are, serious about dating and wanting to try and find, that right person. So Sandy, thank you so much for your time. I
You're
know for
welcome.
taking time out of your busy schedule, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. You have a wonderful time on your trip. I know you have a good
I
trip
will.
coming up, and I can't wait to
It's,
hear all the details.
thanks. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.